Hello everyone, and welcome back to Game Review. My name is Denby, and today I wanted to go over yet another game from the Chessable Masters Tournament. This one was played between Daniil Dubov and Magnus Carlsen, and these are two players that have kind of surprisingly developed a little bit of a friendly rivalry as of late. Dubov is a very young Russian grandmaster. He broke into the top echelon of these players a little bit ago, and in this new age of online tournaments, he's got a very good reputation as an excellent rapid chess player, and he's been sort of taking down some of the big names. He's got a couple really nice wins against Magnus Carlsen in these past few tournaments he's played in, and this game, unfortunately for Dubov, was not a story of that. It was a story of Magnus Carlsen taking his revenge on the Russian youngster. In this game, let's jump into it here. We had Dubov with white playing the move d4, knight f6 by Magnus, knight f3 by Dubov. We have d5, c4, c6, knight c3, and now the move e6. And Magnus chooses the semi-Slav, or as I like to call it, the big triangle defense. You build a triangle towards the center, supporting your d5 pawn with all you've got. And Black's idea in this opening is sort of sometimes you do see Black capturing this pawn on c4, but the true theme of the triangle is you build this pawn up on d5 and you hold it there forever and ever, and you just claim you're never going to beat me on these light squares. And that's exactly what Magnus goes for in this game. It's a very valid plan to go for. We have g3 by Dubov, and now he's transposing more into some Catalan type positions. It is totally possible to play a move like e3, play a move like bishop g5, and go for more standard QGD setups, but instead we have g3 going for the Catalan. Knight bd7 by the world champion, bishop g2, bishop e7, castles, and castles. And now Black has sort of missed his chance to take on c4 if that was what he was going to do. He could have done so here. He could have even done so in this exact position as well. But instead, castles, castles. And now White sort of takes this option away from Black by playing the move b3. Now d takes c4 is just never going to be the same because White captures immediately towards the center with a pawn, controlling the d5 square even more. So no takes on c4 this game. Instead, the main move by the world champion is b6. And now Dubov made an interesting decision here to play the move rook e1. And this is a very much non-standard move in this position. It looks very, very, sort of normal. You play rook e1 to support e4, but after delving into these lines a little bit, it turns out bishop b2 is by far the main move. Bishop a6 is sort of the main reply by Black, threatening this pawn. White deals with this threat by playing the move knight d2. Black quite often plays the move rook c8 to support the center. And now if Dubov played the move rook e1 in this position, or if White played the move rook e1 in this position, we would sort of transpose to this game between Dubov and Carlsen. But instead, in this exact position, White has this additional option of playing the move e4. And I think this is sort of a slightly more respected line for White in order to play for a slight edge here. Just playing e4, this is normal Catalan stuff now. You break down the light squares trying to activate this bishop on the long diagonal. Now, we can compare this position with what Dubov got in the game. In the game, he plays rook e1. We see bishop a6 by Magnus, knight d2, all the same stuff, rook c8, bishop b2. And now, unfortunately, Dubov has sort of missed the boat as far as playing e4. He's just a tempo too slow because he included rook e1. Now, this was likely by design for Dubov. I'm sure he was aware of this e4 option and just chose to go for this instead, but I don't think it was a great decision because the position that he got in the game was honestly pretty uncomfortable for White. This allows Magnus to immediately break with the move c5. This was the point of rook c8, trying to put more pressure on c4 after a move like c takes d4 and d takes d4. Due to this pressure, Dubov chose to take on c5. We see knight takes c5 by Black. B takes c5 is not going to be the most standard move because I think in this case, this is not going to be a structure you're quite happy with, as suddenly this bishop is going to be quite useful here attacking these this hanging pawn structure, as it's known. Instead though, knight takes c5, and now Dubov goes for a pretty interesting line with the move b4. And this invites a pretty drastic change in structure. If black were to just simply retreat with a move like knight d7, this would of course be devastating after the move c takes d5. So Magnus is forced to sort of go for this move, knight c to e4, and now Dubov captures on e4. We see d takes e4, and this is now the change in structure that we have achieved. And Dubov's claim with this structure is probably multifold here. Just like the paper tells, he's attacking this pawn on e4. He's going to try to claim that this is more of a weakness than a benefit for the world champion. It's true that it gives gives black quite a lot of space, but it is sort of overextended and can be susceptible to attack. He's also going to claim that in any end game he might achieve, he does have a 3 versus 2 majority on the queen side and the ability to create a passed pawn sort of at a moment's notice with the move c5. Now, the issue for Dubov is that while these claims might be valid in normal positions, in this specific position, it looks as though black simply has way too much activity to kind of counteract these structural deficiencies that white is claiming that black has. So for the moment, black is immediately threatening to capture on b4. Now, white would love to play the move a3, defending this b4 pawn, but this does allow the very nice move e3 by black, and this is just going to be a devastating attack on the white structure. You know, f takes e, all of a sudden this pawn falls as well. And just as an example line here, obviously these might not be the best moves for either side, but in any position now, it's just going to be black with the advantage with these horrible fractured pawns in the white camp. So because of that, this leaves white with the only move here, b5, sort of resolving both the problem of b4 and c4 and e3 by saving these pawns with tempo on the bishop. But now bishop b7, this pawn is very adequately defended, and black sort of has no real issues here. E3 has to be played by Dubov in order to prevent this pawn from coming forward, but now of course bishop b4 by the world champion is putting a ton of pressure on these white pieces. Rook e2 is sort of the only move to unpin, but now queen d3, and this is just a monster position for the world champion. If you ask the computer, it says that this position is actually just equal, 0-0-0, but obviously here any practical player would, I think, pick the black pieces. You know, there's so much work to be done in an effort to untangle with this stupid looking knight on the d2 square. And in this game, Dubov was simply not up to the task. Rook b1 played in the game, eyeing this b4 bishop indirectly. Simply bishop c3 by the world champion now. And unfortunately for Dubov, he did have to capture this bishop. The game might have continued, queen takes c3, this rook coming over to c1 now to defend the c4 pawn a little bit more, queen back to d3, and it's still going to be massively uncomfortable for Dubov with all these active pieces, but at least these bishops come off the board. This knight's a little bit more free to move about the cabin, so to speak, and the game would in fact continue here. But instead, Dubov goes for bishop a3, and now the very, very natural move by Magnus, rook f to d8, is just devastating for the white position. With this knight once again coming under fire here on the d file. Rook to b3 was Dubov's idea, but now, due to this pin on the knight, queen takes c4 is simply available to Magnus. Queen e1 steps out of one pin, steps into another pin, unfortunately, and now simply queen d5 puts more pressure on this guy. And now bishop b4 was Dubov's only try to defend this knight, and now sort of any move wins here for Magnus. You can simply take on b4, but if you want to find the quote-unquote brilliancy that Magnus played in the game at home, go ahead, pause your videos here. The move, of course, that Magnus played is queen takes b3, just removing this rook from the board and sacrificing the queen for a just overwhelming position. A takes b3, bishop takes b4 is of course the point, and so now Magnus has a rook and a bishop in exchange for the queen, and more than that, this knight on d2 is just a huge issue for white, and it's one that's not going to be solved very easily. Bishop f1 was Dubov's choice. And now the world champion begins torturing his opponent by playing the move a5. Of course, a5 introduces no new threats to the position, but it highlights the fact that there's simply just literally nothing white can do to escape from this bind on his position. This bishop has its choice between 3 squares. It can shuffle back and forth. This queen can go to d1 and back to e1. This rook can't really legally move at the moment. This knight, of course, can't move without hanging the queen. And that's all the pieces that white has. He has nothing better to do than shuffle back and forth. Just literally no way to improve white's position here. So a5 for the world champion. Now queen d1. And then Magnus, of course, plays the nice move h6. Once again, highlighting that there are 0 useful moves for Dubov in this position. And at this point, Dubov had sort of seen enough and resigned in this position after the move h6, forcing resignation. So a great game by Magnus Carlsen, showing Dubov that he can score some nice wins as well. Really crazy stuff in this Chessable Masters tournament. I'm having a great time analyzing these games and watching these games live. If you haven't been checking out the tournament, I would highly encourage you guys to check it out. They've got a great commentary team over there with our own Yasser Sarawan providing some helpful commentary alongside Peter Svidler. Really fun stuff. In the meantime, though, my name is Caleb Denby. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Game Review, and I will see you next time.